I told you I was making $50,000 a year and I had 52,000 in debt. Most people would be like, you don't make enough to pay that off.
Once you experience it, like there's nothing like it. Not owing anything to anyone.
If you're not on this journey with me, then I don't want to move into the future with you. You know what I mean?
But chances are, if you're evolving and the people around you aren't, one of those two things are going to clash. Welcome back to the show. Lauren and I are back for our weekly episode where we talk all things money. Lauren, a listener submitted this spicy question that I wanted to read for you. And just as a reminder for everyone, if you want to have your questions answered by us live on the show, you can go directly to our website, justanothermoneypodcast.com, and click the submit a question button. That goes straight to us and we'll answer it here on the podcast. So this person wrote, me and my boyfriend were getting serious and he asked me to move in. I make $25 an hour and he's a lawyer, so he makes six figures. He suggested I quit my job and just take care of him and the house, which I agreed to. I have a small savings and a bit in my 401k. He informed me of his law school debt and he's essentially living paycheck to paycheck and is late on his mortgage. He said the reality is we can struggle for a year and make it out of this, or you can leave now. Should debt be considered with relationships, or should I be working?
Yeah, this is an interesting situation. I guess I wish I could ask follow-up questions because I'm wondering what that year is that he's talking about. Like if we can struggle for a year, make it out of this, or you can leave now. So I guess I'm just a little confused about that. But all of that aside, I understand moving in with a partner and wanting to create a life together as you're getting more serious. I personally, and again, this is my opinion, but I personally, if I'm not married to somebody, I'm probably not going to be quitting my job and losing my source of income to just be living with somebody. And it really seems like you can't afford to not be contributing at least a little bit, especially since he says that he cannot pay the mortgage on time. That's a little concerning to me as well. What are your initial thoughts on this, Nick?
I was thinking about it and I was like, all right, I got to separate the two. Like I have my opinions on like this whole situation. Like if this was someone I knew and they were asking me, and then I have like an answer for the questions that this person asked. And so just to preface it, my opinion on it, like quitting your job, staying at home to like take care of him in the house, like a stay-at-home girlfriend is not like a real thing in my mind. You know, like if it's serious enough to where you're going to quit your job and take care of him, then he should be serious enough to be marrying you. You know, like in my mind, if you want to be a stay-at-home wife, no problem. Or a stay-at-home husband, whatever it is, right? But at least you two have made a commitment to each other that you're in it together, right? And there's no there's a legal obligation. And then hopefully there's like an emotional obligation that you two have made. So yeah, in my mind, like, I don't think you should have quit your job to stay at home and take care of him and the house unless he's like, hey, let's get married. Even if we just go down to the courthouse real quick, we do this thing and then we can kind of plan out a party and all that stuff later. A lot of people tend to do that now. In terms of like what she's asking, should debt be considered with relationships? Lauren, I don't know. I feel like you and I have talked about this a lot. Like, I think it's okay for people to be at two different stages in their financial journey when they get together or when they get more serious or they're talking about getting married. I think the important thing, and we've mentioned this all the time, is that the values are there, right? Someone may be further along in their journey or someone may be kind of off base from where they want to be. But if they're both like, you know what, I want to make improvements to my financial life. I want to start paying off debt. I want to take money seriously. Where they happen to be in their financial journey is less important, and it's more important that you two are on the same page. So should the debt be considered? I mean, it's definitely something to think about, right? Like, are you so serious about this person that you're ready to commit to multiple thousand, I imagine tens, if not $100,000 worth of law school debt? Are you ready? Like, are you that serious about this person that you're ready to commit to that? Because in my mind, once you get married, like his debt, her debt, it all kind of falls together in my mind.
Yeah, for sure. And I am a little bit curious, obviously we don't have all the answers to this situation, but why is he living paycheck to paycheck? I'm just wondering, probably does have massive amount of student loans. Probably the mortgage doesn't help. So that's probably an answer right there. But I'm just curious how he's living his life. Like you said, I think it's just going to depend on the values there. Like, are you seeing him like having wild credit card debt, outspending, buying things he can't afford when he can't afford his mortgage on time? And I think you need to be able to recognize that, or is it something that you want to put up with or deal with? But yeah, it's definitely not a deal breaker for me. When I was in a relationship with my husband before we got married, like he had some credit card debt and we actually worked on paying off our debts, like on our own plans. And that was like a shared value that we had. But yeah. And I think, the other question that she had was, should I be working? for me in this situation, yeah, I'm going to be working. You can
Yeah.
live together if you want. That's totally fine. But I'm not going to have no income. And then also, let's say you break up, you're also going to have nothing because you're not in a
Hmm.
legally, you're not in a relationship. So nothing is, there's going to be no assistance for you if you do move out on your own, and then you're going to have no income. So that could leave you in a pretty inconvenient situation. So should you be working? Yes. And like I said before, I think that you're going to have to and help a little bit with obviously the mortgage and some things around the house. But yeah, maybe talk about being a stay-at-home like wife or something someday when there is like a
Hmm.
legal sort of thing in place. I don't know.
Yeah, and like I have, no problem with like people. I think it's a good idea if people move in with each other before they
Yeah,
get married. That way they can
same.
kind of like, like test the waters a little bit. Like me and my wife, we lived together for a few years before we got married,
Yeah.
and I think it was a good thing because we learned a lot about each other. We figured out what are the things we have to do. So that's not to me the problem here. The problem is like, yeah, you have no protection for your financial life, your finances, for your future. If he decides to leave you, if he decides to do whatever, and it's same thing if the tables were turned, right? Like it'd be the same difference. But yeah, I think like if these two people were to like be like, all right, you know what, we are serious enough to get married, then I would say at that point it's probably worth it to like, if you're a young couple, you're early in your financial journeys, both of you both of you be work to pay off the debt, set up like your financial life, and then figure out, all right, how do we want our life to actually look? Like, do I want to be a stay-at-home wife, maybe a stay-at-home mom in the future? Do we both want to be working? Like, what do we want our lives to look like? After you get out of the debt, then you can kind of figure out how do we want it to look, and we can start working towards that.
Yeah, for sure. I think, I like, hopefully he had good intentions of wanting her to stay home. I like that maybe he suggested that. I think it was a little premature. I think just this whole situation is a little premature for where they're at in their relationship. Yeah, I definitely want to see you keep you said you have a small savings and a bit in your 401k.
Yeah.
Keep those in place, and don't, cash in anything or take all that out. But yeah, you should probably be working and maybe just, contribute to the household expenses a little bit. And then I don't like that he gave her like an ultimatum, like make it out of this year
Yeah.
or you can leave now. I don't know what that situation or conversation was about, but I would just say let like work until you guys get married or whatever. And then, like you said, create a debt payoff plan and move forward with your finances that way.
Yeah. I always like to give the benefit of the
Yeah.
doubt. Maybe it's just the way this person worded it, that it's
Right.
like we can struggle for
Yeah.
together and then we can come out on the other end. Or like if you're not in this, you can leave. I'm not going to like hold you here, right?
Yeah.
And then also like with the paycheck to paycheck thing, like it could be forced paycheck to paycheck, or it could be based on as a result of his lifestyle, right? Like the credit card debt, the overspending. Like I'm a six-figure lawyer, so I got to live my life a certain way, right? Or it could be like, you know what, I'm putting all my extra money on my debt.
Yeah.
I will say though, if you're late on your mortgage, that kind of leans more towards like the bad spending habits. But
Yeah.
I mean, it's a possibility. But yeah, I mean, I love that this question was kind of asking about the debt, because Lauren, I feel like you and I, we've talked a lot about like our personal financial journeys and things like that. But I don't know if we've ever really dug into like our debt payoff journeys. Do you kind of want to like walk through where you started at, what kind of like got you on that road, and what led you to be here?
Yeah, I don't think we've ever had like a podcast where we talk specifically about our stories. So I think this will be a good one to do that with. But so my financial journey started, I'll say like way before I even started like paying off my debt and everything, probably
Mhm.
back in like my mid 20s. I started, I watched a documentary called The Minimalists. I don't know if you've ever seen it. It's on, it was on Netflix at the time. I think it's on YouTube now. But it was a documentary that basically just, they're a little extreme and like they own few things or whatever, but really the whole premise of their message is to focus less on things and more on like the experiences and people around you. So I really went through a time where I started doing that. I pared down what I had and really
Mhm.
focused on, what mattered to me most. And it really helped me like wrangle my spending habits in because I was focusing more on like being in the moment and like with the people
Mhm.
and experiencing things that I wanted to rather than just like having all this stuff that doesn't matter and was taking from my very small paychecks at the time, right? So I would say
Mhm.
that sort of got me started on like the mindset around like what I'm spending and what I really value and things like that. Then probably 2 or 3 years after that, um, I had just moved in with my boyfriend at the time. He's now my husband, but I moved in with my boyfriend at the time, moved cities, and had decided, I was in my late 20s and I thought, hey, that what they say is you should be buying a house at this time. So I went ahead and said, I think I'm going to buy a house. And I knew that we were not married yet. So I wanted to just do that on my own. Obviously, we'd be living together, but I wanted to just put it in my name. So started looking at houses and I was feeling like very unsure about it. I didn't have much
Hmm.
in savings. I had student loans, I had my car payment, typical stuff. But you know what they say, the house is the next thing that you should be doing, especially if you're in your late 20s, like you're late to the party. So
Hmm.
I remember like I went and looked at some houses with a realtor and I was just feeling like super uncomfortable about the situation. And I was like, I have to listen to what's going on inside or I'm going to make a bad decision. So I remember I
Yeah.
went home that night and I Googled, I went to the almighty Google and I said, should I be buying a house with little in savings? And the answer was a resounding no, you shouldn't. So I told the realtor, hey, I'm gonna stop this for the time being. Like I remember talking to like the mortgage person and I was like, can I put zero down for the house? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I just had no idea what I was really doing. So I remember after that, like falling into like a Google rabbit hole, I had decided that, probably wasn't the best timing to be buying a house. So I told the realtor that I was gonna be done with that. And that was probably in 2018. So I was in my late 20s and decided that I was going to pay off my debt before I did anything else. I wanted to not have debt because obviously that was taking from my paychecks at the time.
Hmm.
And I also wanted to be able to save money up. And, whatever I wanted to put down as a down payment, I wanted to have that. But I also wanted to have an emergency fund because, as we all know, things happen when you own a home. I wanted to have money set aside for that. So for me, I spent the next 3 years really paying off all of my debt. So at the time, getting real with numbers here and vulnerable, I was making probably 50,000 a year, and my debt total was about 52,000. So it's all relative. So if you make $100,000 and you have $100,000 in debt, pretty relative to the same situation, right? So like I said, I spent the next 3 years really paying that off. I scraped my life down to the bare bones to make that happen, especially with the smaller income that I had. Picked up a few side jobs on the side to really make that happen. But the first thing I did was pay off my car because I did the debt snowball. So I took my smallest debt, which was the little bit left I had on my car, and then paid that off. And then I rolled into my student loans and just kept paying that off. So it was, 3 years. I know that's a long time. It was a long time. I don't think I bought clothes during that entire thing, but I knew for small sacrifice on the other side of that was just going to be such a big reward for me. So
Yeah.
I'm trying to think like, all through those years, my husband and I, we were renting. We decided at that time we weren't going to buy. We went and rented. We rented a house. I think our rent was like $1,200 at the time. So we obviously split that for 600 and my paychecks weren't that big. I was only making like 50,000 a year and had money going into a pension for the job that I was at the time. So my paychecks were not that big. I remember getting paid like once a month, and every month I would sit down and map out exactly where that paycheck was going. And I would say probably like 70% of it was going to like
Yeah.
debt. Like I had my small emergency fund set aside, like super small, especially because we were renters. Like if anything happened in our house, we knew that was taken care of. So I had a super small emergency fund and decided to just put everything else I had into the debt that I had to pay off. So and then it actually sped up my journey. I finished just a few months before the 3 year mark because it was kind of at the end stages of COVID. So my student loans were actually at 0%, which helped me
Nice.
immensely. So I wasn't spending like 4 to 5 thousand on interest anymore. It was the last year of it was like 0%, which was absolutely incredible.
Game changer, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it was absolutely incredible. So that was really my journey. It was hard. I was working a job where I was commuting. I think I was commuting for a lot of that. I was commuting an hour one way. So I was constantly listening to money podcasts. I will say,
Mm.
I don't even want to know how many hours of podcasts I listened to, but I was surrounding myself with that information
Yeah.
all the time to stay in zone. And I don't know how I did this for 3 years. I really don't know. But I will say it's like being on the other side of it now, I can barely describe to you like how free you feel to have absolutely no payments and just really just kind of be, I don't feel chained to anything. Like even a job, I'm like, if I get laid off, okay, cool. I have
Yeah.
zero payments other than my house. I could go work at Target and make enough, between my husband and I to make that work. You know what I mean? So I don't know if I'm missing anything big. Do you have any questions about that? I feel like I need to like write it all down because now it's like out of my mind because it was a few years ago now. But any questions that pop up, like first and foremost?
Did you have that Dave Ramsey $1,000 emergency fund that whole time?
I did. I definitely did. Yeah, I guess that's a big part of it too. So I followed the baby steps. kind of like I did the $1,000 emergency fund and then just crushed my debt. There's certain things I disagree with him on, but paying off the debt, it got it done. The hit
Yeah.
that method and just being introduced to that for the first time was absolutely life changing. So yeah, I had my $1,000 emergency fund, threw everything else into my debt to make this all happen. So wasn't really going out to eat much unless like my husband at the time, boyfriend, wanted to pay for it because I was not spending money there. Like I said, I didn't buy clothes. I had already went through a minimalist journey, which really helped me understand that like I didn't need that stuff anyway. I was really focused
Yeah.
on this end goal. And I'll tell you what, like after a few months I think my car was paid off pretty quickly because I had some money in savings. I had less than like $5,000 in savings when I started. So I took like that 3 to 4,000 and put it towards my car. So my car was paid off within like the first year. And then it was just chucking away at those little student loans. And I had the federal student loans. So like inside of that, there's like multiple ones listed inside of there. So I was trying to like chuck those off from like smallest to largest too. So yeah, now looking back, I really can't believe like I did that. But it's
Yeah.
probably one of the proudest things of myself I've ever done, just because, I mean, that was hard,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's one thing that I love about like the Dave Ramsey like style of finance, like operating your finances is it's all or nothing, you
Yeah.
know?
Mhm.
It's like you're paying off debt. That's your sole financial focus. You save up your $1,000, you pay off debt. You don't worry about going out to eat. You don't worry about having all these like life experiences.
Yeah.
And, you worry about getting your life in order first, your financial life in order. Then you can enjoy the rest of life after that. And in my mind, like to me, and that doesn't work for everyone. And that's not a plan for everyone. For me, that was also the thing that was just like, that was perfect. It's like focus on this thing and then we can start enjoying life. We can start you can build the life you want when you're starting from like zero, right? The problem is people try to build this life that they want and they're starting in the negative and then they're trying to live life while they're trying to pay off debt. And then it just gets complicated and emotions come up and you feel like you're missing out. And it's like, dude, if I just commit to this, then I can get out of it quicker. And like you said, like literally the proof is there. $52,000 in 3 years, making 50 grand. And, I'm sure there was some things that helped along the way, but like, that's crazy, right? Like that's 17 grand a year.
Yeah.
Now you had mentioned that at the time you were looking for your house, which prompted the whole, I want to pay off debt, right? Like I was looking for a house. I was too broke. So I started paying off debt.
Yeah.
And, Eddie was just your boyfriend at the time.
Yeah.
What point in your journey of paying off debt did you two get married?
Trying to think okay. So I paid off, actually, this is funny. I took those balloons, that say like 52K. I had those balloons and at my bachelorette party down in Florida, we took the pictures with the balloons. So I had paid off my debt in like April and then we got married in July. So it was, so it was like right in that timeline of,
that's cool. Yeah.
Yeah. Of rolling into being married, which was absolutely incredible. And then during that time, I should say, when I started my journey, he had some credit card debt and he was just like not really that concerned about it. It was from like an old business where he was like running ads and that's where they went on to. So it was just kind of growing from there. And he wasn't really that concerned about it. And then when he saw me become like extreme about paying off my debt, he then paid off his credit cards faster than I got out of debt. And then was like way more crazy about the numbers than me. So we got married debt free, which was absolutely incredible. And then we ended up buying a house. We got married in July, bought our first house in like January. So right around the same timeline there. So and we finally had the money because we actually had money, we were putting away for the wedding as well. So we had some money to finally put down on the house and obviously some time to save it up after my debt-free journey was over. And then his was over. So he was obviously putting money aside for that as well. But
Nice.
Quite interesting.
I have two questions. One is about the saving as because you finished paying off debt and you got married pretty quickly after. So I want to ask about the saving, but before that, so you were in your journey of paying off debt. You and Eddie were getting pretty serious, I imagine, because coming up on getting married was soon after that. Yeah. You said he saw you get like serious about paying off your debt, and that prompted him. Yeah. Was there at all like a conversation? Because like I imagine like where Lauren is at today with her finances versus where Lauren was before. When she was looking at buying that house, right? Like the thought of like, how people should manage their finances was probably very different, as your idea of managing finances evolved, did it ever become a conversation with with Eddie to be like, hey, like I'm starting to really care about these things, and obviously I care about you, so like, do you care about these things too? Like, was that ever a conversation, or did it kind of just like you started to evolve and he started to evolve right alongside you?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And if I remember correctly, like we were very open about everything. We talked about money and stuff like that. But
Hmm.
when it came down to the debt part of it, and I was sort of wanting him to want to be debt free too.
Hmm.
He was just like not really that concerned about it and was just kind of like, I'll just do it when I feel like it. So I just sort of like was like, you know what? We're not married yet. At the time when I started this, we weren't even engaged. So I was like, you know what? I'm just going to do my own thing. I know this is what I want for myself and my future. And so I'm going to do it. And then it was just kind of like he was over here, like seeing me like killing it with like paying off my debt and stuff. And then I think it was just like him being around that and like, you know, how I was changing my mindset around things. And I think that's whenever he really got into like wanting to pay it off too. I think, you know, monkey see, monkey do. I think that's a really big thing there. Now I know some relationships are not going to be that way. It's like sometimes they want to, it's like fire and water. You want to do the exact opposite. But I felt like he just needed time to come around to the idea, and really saw that I was over here like, you know, just like slaying away, just like, you know,
Yeah.
killing my debt off. And he was like, oh, like he had so much less than I did. So he's like, oh, I can do this easily. You know what I mean? So, yeah, I think it was definitely an interesting conversation. And, you know, I have a lot of different feelings about money and relationships now that I'm older and, you know, have been through
Yeah.
all of this. But, yeah, we were never really on like, we've always had open communication, but I feel like that wasn't a value of his at first. But now it's like, he's like super serious about like, you know, when we purchase something these days, it is not, other than a mortgage, it is not on debt. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Cards, everything, like we're saving for it. So that's kind of where we are at this point.
Yeah, and I think when two people are a good match, it's hard for one person or the other to become like very passionate about something and for that not to rub off on the other person.
Yeah.
Or for that other person to not want to at least like dabble in that passion. You
Yeah.
know, like whether it's with like your fitness or taking
Yeah.
care of your nutrition or random hobbies, you know, if you two are living your life together, it's very likely that everything kind of commingles, including those types of passions. And of course, there's certain things like my wife is probably never going to try jujitsu, and I'm like all about that right now. But I'm probably also never really going to do hot yoga, which she loves to do.
Come
You
on,
know,
Nick.
but we're both like about our fitness, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But okay, other question for you then. So, if I'm understanding correctly, so you paid off your debt, and then a few months later you got married. Was there like as you were approaching that debt payoff, I imagine you can, you know, it's like the light at the end of the tunnel. You can see the finish line. Was there any deviation from, okay, now I'm 100% paying off debt to, okay, I'm going to pay off my debt, but the wedding is a few months beyond that. And so maybe I'm going to split my focus as you got closer to that finish line? Or did that not happen?
So I think towards the end of it, so like I said, I finished it like right around 2020, 21. So like there was some talk about student loans potentially being
Hmm.
like discharged. So like I may have been able to like cancel some of my student loans. So what I was doing is I was actually putting that money in a savings account, especially because student
Nice.
loans
Yeah.
were 0% at the time. So I was putting that money in there because I guess however they were setting up like the student loans being canceled, like I would have qualified for it because of the loans that I had out or whatever. So I was like kind of waiting around for that to happen. And so I just kept putting I think I had like close to $10,000 in my savings at that point. And then when I got enough to like pay it off and then kind of realized that like the government was just probably not going to do this.
Yeah.
It wasn't going to be true. I went ahead and just paid it off. So I didn't, we were fine on the wedding stuff. Like actually, that was more of like my husband's savings goal at the time because he knew that I was
Nice.
so focused on just paying off my debt and he didn't want me to deviate from that because I was so close. So he was putting a lot of his money towards the wedding at that point. So no, I didn't feel like I needed to like, mess with my plan. I was so close at the end, but
Yeah.
it was tempting with the student loan stuff. I was like, I have 10,000 sitting here. Do I have to pay this? Like
Yeah.
I could have just let that ride for a very long time because I don't even remember when they started putting like the interest back on the student loans. I really could have sat on it and I did sit on it for a very long time and thought, what if they, why am I not thinking of the word? What if they cancel these or whatever?
Yeah.
I don't know the word, but what if they, discharge these? What is the word, Nick? Why can't I think of it?
Just cancel, right? They were looking to cancel it.
Yeah, refund. I don't know. And I was like, what if they do this and then
Yeah.
I've lost $10,000,
Yeah.
And then, so even when I paid it off, I finally just said, you know what? I want to be done. I've done this for almost 3 years now. I just want to see the zero in the account and then my money
Yeah.
from my paychecks or my money finally. Maybe I'll go buy a new outfit. It's been 3 years. But so I did. I paid it off, and it was it was just like a big rock had been lifted off my shoulders at that point. I made the decision. I could have kept it. I probably could have kept it for a few years because they weren't charging interest at that point, and I could have just let it sit there and see what happened. But it didn't happen, obviously. So I'm glad I paid
Yeah.
it off when I did.
Yeah, for my wife, it was very similar because she at the time was paying off her student loan debt. That was like a huge focus for her. Like she's like, I wanted to pay off my debt before we were not before we were talking, before we were gonna get married. She was like, I really want to enter our marriage like debt free.
Yeah.
And she was like, do I just put the money towards the loans or do I? And we were like, all right, why don't you just save it up in a savings account? Because if it gets canceled, like you can't control whether it did or it didn't. So you might as well just keep that money to the side until you're ready. And then it got to a point where she had exactly enough to pay him off. Mm-hmm. And I was at the time, I remember just like, this is probably not going to happen. There was so much back and forth on it. I was like, you might as well just pay it off. Let's be done with it. Like you can remove the thought of like having this debt from your mind, and then we could just focus on the rest of our life, And so there was a very similar conversation for her too, is like, do I just save it up? And that's what she did. She saved it up until she had a big chunk of money, and then she just paid it all off. And I remember that was a hard day for her because she was like, man, seeing that she also had about 50,000. She was like seeing my Vanguard account at 50,000, and all of a sudden it said like zero, But then also the debt was at 50,000, and now that said zero, and so that was a big one. But what do you feel like? What do you feel like was one of the biggest things that like got you like to the end of that journey, that 3 years? Because that's a long time, For some people, it's a 5-year journey or longer. For some people, it's a shorter, like a year journey. What do you think got you through those 3 years?
I don't even know. Like I said, I listened to money podcasts, like every type of money podcast you could imagine. I listened to that because I was having long commutes as well. So I was commuting at least like an hour and 15 minutes one way for my job. So I was commuting a lot. I was just absorbing every piece of financial information I could over those 3 years. Literally, I did not miss a day. Like I listened to podcasts like crazy. So I feel like surrounding myself in that environment, if I was put in like going out and doing things that wasn't getting me in that mindset of like wanting to be debt free, I feel like that's where people start to fall off. But like I was so in the zone constantly. I was just constantly feeding this information and these success stories and all of these things in my ears, and it was just like really keeping me going. I also think like having a supportive partner, finally, like it did not take Eddie long to come around to it. And then him really being like, okay, like, let's do this, of course, like I said, he paid his off pretty quick and then started saving for our wedding. So it was like, okay, I can, we're going to be a team here. I'm going to do this. You focus on your debt, because we weren't married at the time. So it was, we were really kind of focused on our own two little plans here. So yeah, being around people that support you, and then just really just being so absorbed in like the space that you want to be in. I feel like that with anything, like you have to really get yourself into that sort of mentality. But yeah, I think just, and then obviously the bigger why was, wanting to be debt free. So it would completely change how our life, how the way we could live our life after, we were married debt free. And I would be able to, do the things that I want to do and the bigger goals that I had. You really have to keep those at the forefront there. I'm not going to get into all of, all the reasons of why, but I think you have to really have that vision ahead of you. And then, to really surround yourself with people and, the reasons that you want to be doing this. I don't know.
100%. I was talking to someone recently about that environment, and he was saying like he doesn't really have anyone in his life that could be like a role model in terms of like being financially responsible.
Yeah.
It was like the same friends that he's known for a long time, and those friends are just, like you could easily surround yourself with people who just don't really care.
Yep.
They go to work, they get their paycheck, they spend it on the weekends.
Yep.
And that's, for a lot of people, that's how it is, because they don't enjoy their job, so they really want to enjoy the weekends.
Yeah.
And that equation means you're going to spend all the money you bring in, And what I was telling him is like, you don't have to like lose these friends, but you also got to take a look and ask like, the reality is you're going to become the average of the people who you hang around with. I'm a big believer in that. And so if you want to, if you want to elevate that, you got to surround yourself with people who you want to be more like, you know, because that's going to be the easiest way, right? You can absolutely keep the same group of friends and totally evolve, but chances are if you're evolving and the people around you aren't, one of those two things are going to clash. You know, either the people aren't going to vibe with you anymore, or you're not going to vibe with the people anymore. And it's so much easier if you elevate yourself in an environment where everyone else wants like similar things. And whether that's, you know, literally, like you said, listening to podcasts every single day, like you said, 2.5 hours every day is like, that's a lot of information, you know, or it's by surrounding yourself with people who also want the same thing, who want to, you know, evolve past where they're at now.
Yeah. And going back to what you asked before about, you know, the conversation that my husband and I, well, my boyfriend at the time, that we had back then, I really think that if he had never come around to it, wasn't really supportive, didn't really want to talk about it, I don't know if we ever would have got married or made it past that point, because my life, I was so destined to get where I wanted to be. And I grew as a person so much through that journey, and just realized like the standards I was setting for myself, and really just evolving my entire financial future, and, you know, whatever. But so I feel like, you know, we really wouldn't have been together if he wouldn't have come around to that and would have just been on another page with me, because I would have been doing that on my own. And that would have been like, this was something that was really important to me. And like, if you're not on this journey with me, then I don't want to, you know, move into the future with you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't know. Just, and especially now that I'm older and, you know, the people on TikTok don't like it, but, you know, if I were to do it all over again, like, I'm going to make sure up front that that's something that matters to that, you know, to that person, you know, like, this is really important stuff. And you have to make sure that the partner you're on this journey with is on the same page as you.
Yeah. I mean, when finances were starting to become a big part of my life, like wanting to learn about personal finances, wanting to level up my personal finance game, and like wanting to really take control of everything, like at that time, like I had said, like, I think it's hard if two people are a good match. It's really hard for you to become passionate about something and the other person not, or to not enjoy it at all, you know? And so it just, like, as I was becoming so passionate about it, like making dinner, I was listening to like, and no shame about this, but Dave Ramsey was like my first introduction. So it was like watching the Ramsey show all the time. And I was making dinner, and you know, so obviously my wife, my girlfriend at the time, she, you know, we were living together. She would hear it all the time too. And then it just became something that she naturally was like becoming intrigued to, you know, it was like, oh, like, because especially when you listen to the shows like that, where it's like real stories of real people, you start to wonder, you know, you start to think about it, and then you start to look at your own personal finances and think like, all right, what can I be doing better? You know, it's hard not to, once you start kind of surrounding yourself with that.
Well, I mean, I told you I was making $50,000 a year and I had 52,000 in debt. Most people would be like, you can't pay that off. You know what I mean? Like, you don't make enough to pay that off. And I, you know, listening to podcasts like that was a really big wake up call for me, that like, I could make it happen. And I did, you know, and there's still people that will hear this story and be like, no, you didn't. There's no way you did that. You had this. I was making $50,000 a year. I paid off 52,000 in debt. You know, I lived with my boyfriend. Like, I don't know what you want me to tell you, you know, it's the truth. And it's just a lot of hard work and dedication, and you really can't stray from your plan.
Yeah. And I feel like living with someone really is like a game changer too. You know, like 100%. Because if the amount of expenses the expenses of a household don't double if you go from one person to two, right? You know, you're not going to suddenly have twice as much in expenses, but your rent's going to cost half as much. Your grocery bill is going to cost, you know, maybe a little bit more, right? But you then split that with two people, you know? So like it really, like, you can focus so much more on paying off debt if you're also living with someone, because your expenses just go down drastically. I think that's a big plus too. It's so much easier to build wealth if you have a partner who's there helping you build wealth.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, if I wasn't with that person, you know, if I wasn't with my husband at the time, we weren't renting together. First off, probably I wouldn't be in an apartment that it was $1,200 a month at the time. And this was back in, you know, 2018. So don't come at me for rental prices, but I probably would have went for something, you know, like one of the first apartments I had was like $850 a month. It was a studio apartment. It was my favorite place in the world. But I mean, it was only a studio apartment in like this family's basement, but I loved that apartment so much. But I would have done something like that. Would it have been as fast? No. Would it have been 3 or 4 years? Yeah. And would I still have done it? Absolutely. You know what I mean? Like, I still wouldn't have let those extra year and a half or whatever, you know, throw me off my plan. Like, if you want it bad enough, you're going to do it. But I think and I think just these days in general, like, we have a really hard time of like not wanting to have the best of the best, because we're working really hard and we think we deserve it. And, you know, great. That's fine if you do, whatever. But you have to be willing to sacrifice a little bit, or, you're just going to live an average life with debt and, not being able to feel the freedom of being debt free. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. The debt free, once you I think you said this before, once you experience it, like there's nothing like it, not owing anything to anyone. That was the big thing for me. It's like the flexibility to say that I don't owe anything to anyone, and whatever's going to happen, like on income side of things, I'm okay because I have the savings built up, because I don't have debt, because my expenses are like almost zero, like my expenses are so low. It's literally just, what do I need to survive?
Yeah.
That's all I need to bring it. That's how like my mind thought about it initially. It was like, here's what I need to bring in to cover things. And if I add debt to the equation, that number goes up.
Yeah.
Especially being self-employed, it made sense in my mind to think, what's the baseline? What do I need to bring in at a minimum? And if I can, as I earn above that, all that money is just, I like to call it like money to play with, you know? But if I bring debt into the equation, now that baseline goes up, and then I have to earn even more to have that same room of like play money, And so that's how I like to think about it, is like, if your expenses are extremely low, well, the way to get to that is by having zero debt, having a very, you don't even have to have a frugal lifestyle, but just not having all these financial obligations, that's to me where you get at. I would say like my financial journey really started post college, but I would say like the beliefs that got me onto that started in college. I remember when I was in college, I was doing like freelance media at the time, and it was really just for like this one client who I would work with throughout most of my college career. And I just remember like saving up money. Like that was the thing. Like I was like, all right, I'm in college, I really just want to save up as much money as I possibly can. I didn't really have a goal in mind, but I just remember like wanting to look at it sounds so silly, just wanting to look at my bank account and be like, all right, I have a good chunk of money in there.
Yeah.
I was fortunate enough not to graduate with zero student loan debt. I was also an RA, and so that paid for a huge chunk of what would have been student loan debt. But I remember when I graduated, I did have a car debt of $15,000. And for me, I remember like looking at that and being like, man, that's a lot of money every single month to just pay towards it, right? It was like a $500 per month. I'm trying to remember the exact amount. It was $500 per month. And I just remember thinking like, again, and that's when my mind started thinking like, every single month I have to pay this. And so on top, it was when I moved out of my parents' house right after I graduated, and I was like having my own expenses, for the first time in my life. And it was like, all right, that $500 a month sucks, having to pay that really sucks. And then that's also when I really started to focus on like being a freelance media creator. And so that was like a big part of my life, as well as like wanting to understand finances, because I just didn't feel confident with money at the time. And so as I started getting, okay, how do I actually manage the finances? Not just, for my personal finances, but also just as a business, as a freelancer, how do I get good at that? That's when like I said, I really dove into Dave Ramsey. That was like my first introduction to personal finance.
Yeah.
And I hate to say like the word evolved, like it's not like, I think, I in my mind, the best way to describe it is like I've evolved past that, like Dave Ramsey, but and it's not to talk down on it. I think Dave Ramsey stuff is like, I think it's great for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And I think if you just want to take control of your finances, his stuff is perfect. I think if you want to go beyond that, right, you want to take control and then really start to level it up, then I think, other areas of personal finance are going to intrigue you. But I remember when I really dove into understanding how do I create a budget? I remember watching so many videos from Dave Ramsey of like, how do you actually budget your money? How do you handle your finances on a monthly basis? And then obviously the conversation of debt comes up. And so when I graduated college, I had some money in savings, and I was like, all right, if I'm going to really be about this, like I want to try following his plan. So I remember taking all the money I had in my savings and paying off my car with it. And it just sucked because literally I had like 15 grand left on my car, and I had about 15 grand left in savings. And I was like, all right, so the next time I get another $1,000, I'm going to then pay it off so that I have my $1,000 emergency fund. Yep. I remember that. And it was like, it was a big move, but it felt really, really good to do it. I just remember that feeling of like paying it off, and it was like, wow, this is cool. Like you don't owe the money anymore. Like you feel debt free. And again, that was when I first got into my first apartment. And it just was, it just felt like a game changer, especially because at the time, like I wasn't making, crazy money as someone who's self-employed freelancer. It was like just trying to like scrape by almost, And I remember not having to pay anything for my car was like a big plus for me.
Yep.
And it was like, awesome. Now I have $500 extra per month that I can start to build up my savings. It's just more cushion, less that I have to, like the baseline of what I have to earn every single month. Like it just kind of took some of that weight off my shoulders, I guess, so to speak. But after, I remember though, like before graduating college, like my mind was so different. It was like, very much so about the payments. Like, oh, if you can afford the payments, you can afford it, you know? And I remember at the time the car loan wasn't like a big thing because I was like, it's just $500 a month. I also didn't have any other real expenses because I was in college, I was an RA, I was living on campus. My food was paid for by the university. My housing was paid for by the university. So it was like very little expenses. I was like, oh, okay. So all I have to worry about is this car. And then when we graduate, I can just get an apartment and it'll just be like payment after payment after payment. And I quickly saw how that could balloon, you know, and you get stuck in that place where it's like, all right, now I have rent, now I have my car payment, and you have student loan payments, and then you have insurance, you have phone bills, right? All these different things start to pile up. And before you know it, you're looking at $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 just to survive every single month. That was like a big like transition for me from going from, okay, can I afford the payment to like, can I actually afford to buy this thing, whatever it is, you know? And so once I got out of debt, it was like a really big part of my life to say, you know what, I don't ever want to go back into it. And very similar to you, it was like, I was listening to Dave Ramsey all the time. And then I was starting to dabble in other types of personal finance. But I remember Dave Ramsey was the one I was listening to for a long time. And my wife just like always would hear it in the background at the time. Like I said, at the time she was my girlfriend. I started getting really serious about it. And then she started getting really serious about it. And then we would talk like, okay, well, like, what do you want to start doing with your finances? That's when she wanted to get serious about paying off her debt. And like I said, I graduated, I had some money in savings, I paid off my car loan. And then, so for me, the big thing was I want to start saving for a home. And this was, 5 years ago now. And then, that's really where the journey of saving for a home started, but it all started because I was listening to these different podcasts about how do I figure out how to build a budget first. And then the budgeting is like, okay, well, here's my monthly expenses. I want those to be lower. The way to get there is to start paying off some debt.
Yeah, that's exactly what I wanted, because my little paychecks back in the day,
Yeah.
I didn't want them all to be going towards debt, know.
100%. For me, it was like, all right, I'm making some money as like doing this freelance thing, and it sucked to see it being eaten up. It sucked to see it being eaten up by rent, which was like a new concept in my mind as a young adult. Car payment, car insurance, all these different things. And so it was like, how do I get this number as low as possible so that, I have to, not that I have to earn as low as possible, but so that what I have to earn to make it, quote unquote, make it through this month is like as minimal as possible. That was where my mind was at. And then it became, if this number is low, the more I make, I can just start putting that money towards whatever I want. And so once I paired that with like, all right, now I really want to like shift my eyes on purchasing a home in my 20s. Like, to me, that was like a big goal for me. Like, I wanted to buy a home in my 20s. I felt like in my mind that was like the image of success. Like, as a young adult, is like, you can get into a home, early and do it the right way. And so for me, it was like, all right, if my expenses can be really low, then I can just, as much as I can earn, most of that can go towards savings. I remember when we were saving, when we really got like, when I started making decent money, our expenses were relatively low, and I was all about saving for the home. It was like $2,000 a month. I was saving. My wife was at the time working on paying off her student loan debt, and then beyond that, she started saving as well. And so it was like $3,000 or $4,000 a month that we were saving up, combined. And we weren't married at the time, so it was like separately. But we knew we wanted to buy a home after we got married, so it was just and all of that was possible because we paid off our debt.
Oh, absolutely. And I'll say something to add on to like my story, like just on the other side of it. So I mentioned that I was making like $50,000, and like after the debt was paid off, like that was much more doable. Obviously in these days, like 50,000 is not that much, but whenever I didn't have debt, I didn't feel like I was broke anymore. You know what I mean? But what happened is, and I truly, believe in this, if you treat your money well, it's going to come back to you. So probably so I paid off my debt in like April or May, and I had a really interesting like opportunity come my way to completely change career paths and move into like tech into the world of big tech. And so I did that, and my income almost like tripled. You know what I mean? So it was crazy because, you know, if I would have told that story when I was working in big tech, they'd have been like, oh, you have a big income, like, you know, you can just pay it off. And I was like, no, I did that while I was making $50,000. This all came about after the fact, which is the coolest part of the story, because I think it just goes to show you, like, you start managing your money well and doing these things, like there is something to that. You know what I mean? So, and that's not the first example I have of that. I know somebody else that something very similar happened to them. So I'm telling you, start treating your money well, and it's going to come back to you and reward you big time.
100%. I mean, 100%. I think for me, the big thing was like wanting to feel like as a freelancer, it's like I just had no clue what I was doing with my money on a monthly basis. And for me, that was like the intro into figuring out, like, going down the rabbit hole of personal finances was like, I just don't know what I'm doing on a monthly basis. Like, I'm someone who likes to feel like I have a plan put together. Yeah. And so it was like, what's my plan monthly with my money? You know, how do I figure that out? I remember like looking up like the 50, 30, 20 budget. How do I make that work? Like all these things like that, you know? And, but yeah, that was like the first place. And then it was like, all right, once you get into the world of budgeting, it's very quickly that you see like, all right, here's all my expenses. Like, how do I get these lower, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I'll say, Nick, you know, I wish I would have started way back when you did, because I didn't start my journey until like my late 20s, didn't finish it till my early 30s. And now, like, so I feel like I'm a little, but I still feel a little behind on like retirement savings. I don't think I'm behind. I think I'm kind of right on like what the average would be, but it doesn't feel great because, you know, I'm competitive, Nick. I want to be ahead. So I feel like I'm now instead of like paying off debt, I'm like really investing, because I'm not working till 65. We know that. So, you know, I want to be done sooner rather than later. But yeah, I wish I would have started much, much earlier. I wish there was some type of, I don't know if students would take it seriously, but some type of like exit sort of, you know, financial plan. Like, okay, your career path is going to make this. Here's your student loan payment from the student loans you've taken out. Here's what rent looks like. Here's what your car payment looks like if you go buy a new car. And then that you're like, because I think that'd be a really good like educational opportunity to be like, oh, that's not good. You know what I mean? So
the problem then is that you, as a university, they're going to have to ask you, what's your average income going to be? Because that's the only way you can have that conversation, right? Is like, what's your average income? And then students are going to start to look at, wow, this degree is not going to get me anything.
Yeah,
you know?
I'm going to drop out of this university.
Yeah, that's a conversation, because I remember in my high school was very big on like, we want to get everyone into college.
Yeah.
And it was less important what college you went to, what degree you were getting, and it was more important that you got an acceptance letter for our high school. That was like the big push to get 100% of students into college. And so it was less important what you went into. So even if you were getting like a literature degree or whatever it was, you know, like it didn't matter, you know, and looking back on that now, I'm like, that absolutely matters. You know, not everyone needs to go to college. I don't think the life experiences that you can get in college, you can get so many other places. And then the level of education, I think, you know, like there's so many things in college I did that like, yeah, I don't know. I don't think college is the financially the right choice for everyone. Or if you're going to go just to go, like, start at a community and then transfer over somewhere, you know, save yourself tens of thousands of dollars before you, at 18 years old, sign on to take out that much debt.
Yeah. And all of this to say, continue to live as a broke college student into your early 20s, get all of your debt paid off, you know, start a savings account, you know, make sure you've got all that stuff good to go. And then like, you're pretty much set after that, you know? The problem is we build up our lifestyle as soon as we get that first job. And then you spend like your 30s trying to like pay off your debt and stuff. And then you're probably just like, I don't want to do this anymore. You know what I mean? So it's just going to hang around forever. So the earlier you can do it, the better, I would say.
100%. Okay, that wraps up today's episode. And as always, if you want to help us grow, the best way you can do that is by subscribing and sharing this with a friend.
Yeah, and if you want to have your money question answered on the show, you can visit our website, justanothermoneypodcast.com, and click the submit a question button. And don't forget to join us for the next episode of Just Another Money Podcast. The information, opinions, and recommendations provided on this podcast are for entertainment purposes only and do not constitute professional financial advice. Any financial decisions you make based on the content of this podcast are your responsibility. We strongly recommend consulting with a licensed financial advisor or other qualified professional before making any significant financial decisions. By listening to this podcast, you acknowledge that we are not liable for any financial outcomes.